The Second State Duma in Russian history convened on February 20th, 1907. Right away, it was plagued with the same problems of the first, with deputies fighting with each other and the government. There was an attempt to form a permanent coalition of the opposition parties, but inter-party differences made this impossible. Nonetheless, they were united in hating the government at least. The order of the day was assessing Stolypin's reforms and debating a more substantial land reform law. Almost every opposition party issued a replacement proposal, while the rightist parties largely condoned the existing reform. A proposal from the SRs proved the most popular, and an agrarian committee was established to examine it. For a moment, it seemed like land reform was actually possible. On the right, a Congress of the United Nobility met, and as soon as the new Duma began, they immediately sought to have it dissolved. Behind the scenes, the Fifth Party Congress for the Social Democrats took place, and this time, Lenin's Bolsheviks gained a majority, leading to a shift away from some Menshevik positions going forward. When the Duma met, the Social Democrats pushed for some new legislation, such as amnesty for political prisoners and lightening of sentences, but this was shot down. There was also fierce attacks against the fiscal policy of the government, the Social Democrats going so far as to call for a refusal to confirm the budget. One of the last straws for the government was the left's vehement attacks against the military and its expansion, in what became known as the Zarabov incident. With this, the Tsar was just about finished with the Duma. At this point, the government desired to dissolve the Duma, but they decided they needed to go further to prevent a repeat of the last election. Therefore, they secretly crafted new election laws to be issued at the moment of dissolution. There was no doubt that this was constitutionally illegal, but they went ahead and prepared a new law, barring many national minorities from voting, temporarily suspending the elections entirely in the frontiers, and radically altering the proportion of electors to the Duma, such that landowners disproportionately controlled them. In the first week of May, a conspiracy sanctioned by Stolypin attempted to frame half the Social Democrats for involvement in an illegal military organization and arrest them, causing a scandal in the Duma. Then on June 1st, Stolypin took to the Duma himself and announced the government found evidence from this raid, and it implicated the whole party. He demanded that 55 deputies be surrendered by the Duma immediately. The Duma created a committee to investigate the matter, which would fail to find evidence of illegality. The next day, the left decided if the Duma was going to collapse anyway, they might as well tank the budget on the way out. But the rest of the parties combined prevented them from getting to the matter. Thus, the June 2nd session ended in failure, and the government was tired of waiting. That night, at 3 a.m., the orders from the Tsar were signed and ready. In the morning, the police were placed in the Duma and in the streets. Party headquarters were searched, and the government rounded up as many of the 55 deputies as they could find. Just like that, the Coup of June 1907, as it was called, left the Duma dissolved, many of its members arrested, and the elections henceforth heavily controlled by the government. In light of this, many leftists decided to return to boycotting the Duma before the third election. The cadets, stunned by the coup, opposed Stolypin's actions, but maintained a position of not risking further popular opposition. The Trudovics were gutted by the anti-peasant voter laws, but now more radicalized than ever. The popular socialists mostly died from lack of popularity. The socialist revolutionaries withdrew from elections, and the social democrats were driven back into hiding and were ripping themselves apart. They now debated if there should be liquidation of underground activity and more broad legal operation. As such, they fought over the proper use of terror and robbery, and where to go from here electorally. The Mensheviks, and ironically also Lenin now, had a similar attitude as the cadets and urged cautious participation in the Duma, while some Bolsheviks, like Lev Kamenov, remained boycottists. Much of the borderlands had been disenfranchised, but regional parties hung on where possible. This was especially the case in Poland, although the Polish delegation dropped from 46 to 10 seats. The right-wing parties mostly sought to court and increase the power of Russians in Poland, while most regional parties remained banded together in the Polish bloc. And after the government's attacks on their rights, the Polish bloc was against the regime more than ever. Despite the increasing dissatisfaction, from September to October, the election was held. And what a surprise! It's a huge victory for the right. The Octoberists win with 154 seats. Followed by the far right with 147, although about 96 of them from the moderate right would develop into a series of separate groups. The cadets then followed with 54, Peaceful Restoration with 28, the Social Democrats with 19, the Trudovics with 14, and all other parties and independents receiving a total of 26 seats. These results essentially reversed the previous elections. with the right now controlling almost the entire assembly, the far right alone shooting up from single digits to over 50 seats, about 32 of which being held by the Union of the Russian People. Leftists went from a couple hundred to a couple dozen seats, and the cadets were halved. In a far cry from the powerful peasant factions of the First Duma, virtually all deputies were now property owners. An Octoberist, Nikolai Khomyakov, was elected chairman of the Duma, while one Octoberist, moderate rightist, and rightist each occupied the vice presidency, and a rightist was elected secretary. Pyotr Stolypin continued as prime minister. Now then, will the Duma finally last this time?